Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Resilience Talk with Brad Neufeld. I have a very special guest here today, but this is the show where you will discover that every challenge that you face in life is conquerable, especially when we work together. Wow, I got an awesome guest here today, Mr. Laban Ditchburn, all the way from New Zealand. If we can say that. This is the mouse copy of his book entitled Bet on You. And Laban is the world's best courage coach. And he'll tell you a little bit about that, why he says that. I actually love your title, Laban. So anyway, everybody, Laban, I've known him for a while online because we did a interview with him on the other side of addiction a little while ago. And then now he's here in the States. And I says, man, if you're here, you've got to come by and check out our studio. And here we are. So, Laban, tell us a little bit about what's it like to be the world's best courage coach. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I just wanted to acknowledge you for having me in the studio. It's my first in-person podcast recording, and it's so exciting. And in addition to the mouse size Bet on You, yes, there's also a mouse size Who Moved My Cheese as well.
Is there really? Okay.
Yeah. It's about a mouse who moved someone else's cheese.
Nice.
So no other small books.
Yep.
But
yeah, very aware of that book.
It's a powerful question, Brad.
Yep.
Powerful question. The world's best courage coach, and people might be listening to it going, who the heck dares call themselves the world's best courage coach? Well, the world's best courage coach is zero to do with ego. And it came from a declaration that I made in September of 2021.
Okay.
And if I could share the story with you.
Yeah, please do.
There's a gentleman known as the Ultimate Coach who lives in Mesa in Arizona. His name's Steve Hardison.
Okay, I've heard of him.
And he is a devout Mormon guy. He's got a huge, big family, super successful. And he's really a life coach, for lack of a better word, to simplify what people might think about. But he's more than that. And he's been responsible for coaching people like Iyanla Van Zandt, who was Oprah Winfrey's coach, the CEOs of multi-billion-dollar organizations, world-class athletes, Olympic medalists, that kind of thing. And he never was interviewed. He never would do this. He never would go on podcasts. He never had a book. He never had a TV show, nothing. And he even turned down multiple appearances on the Oprah Winfrey show.
Oh, wow.
Right? He was so dedicated to just being with his clients. And to give you an idea, financially, to work with this guy for 50 hours of his time is $200,000 US,
oh,
right?
My gosh. Okay.
So, and that's probably blowing people's minds anyway, right?
Yeah, but still,
So, but the only footage of this guy that existed was on YouTube, and it was about a 10-year-old video of him, about 2 hours and 10 minutes long, talking about Deuce Latui, who was the first Tongan footballer, who I think might have even been from Utah originally, right? Mm-hmm. He's a Mormon guy.
Yep.
And it's not about football. It's about declaring and being. And I was so moved by this YouTube video, Brad, that I was like, this is one of the best things I've ever seen in my life. And I was like, I need to see this. I need to speak to this Steve Hardison guy to see if what he's like in real life is like he is on this video. Mm-hmm. And I'm very resourceful. Yes. And I got his phone number and I called him up straight away. And I rang this guy and he picks up the phone. And, hi, Steve speaking. I said, Steve Hardison, it's Laban Ditchburn from Melbourne, Australia. He goes, Laban, so great to hear from you. I've been waiting for this call all my life, right? Never spoken to this guy before at all. And I'm like completely enamored by this guy, right? Mm-hmm. I said, Steve, I just watched this video of you talking about this football guy and it just moved me so profoundly. And I just wanted to see if what you're like in real life, like you are in this video. Mm-hmm. And I said, I just wanted to ask you one very specific question. He goes, what's that, Laban? I said, what do you need help with?
Interesting.
Because I knew this guy.
Out of any question.
Right? He had everything, as far as I could tell. He was very financially successful, a thriving business, dealing with the best of the best, right?
Right.
Amazing family and marriage. Mm-hmm. He said, wow, Laban, I just want to acknowledge you for asking me that question, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
He said, you know what? He goes, I'm 8% body fat. I do 10 miles a day. I'm 67 years of age. I got everything a man could ever want, but I just wanted to thank you for asking me that question.
Okay.
And I said, oh, no worries, Steve. I said, are you still not doing podcast interviews and that type of thing? He goes, that's right. And I said, oh, the reason I asked is I'm a speaker, I'm a coach, and I've got this amazing podcast series, and I'm well on my way to being known as the world's most positively influential speaker.
Okay.
But someone that I respect and admire said to me that there's too much ego associated with that statement. And Steve Hardison, the 67-year-old devout Mormon guy, goes, "You tell that person to fuck off."
Oh, God.
Hopefully you can beep that out. "Do you know who I am?" And he always said a well-timed expletive is really important in life. Right? He goes, and I go, "Who are you, Steve?" He goes, "I'm the best coach in the world."
Okay.
And he delivered it in a way that had no ego. Nothing.
Interesting.
And it was so, I've never experienced anything like this before, Brad.
Yeah, yeah.
At the time, my wife had to make a mercy dash to Russia for some urgent family stuff, which maybe we can talk about later.
Okay.
This was in the middle of the lockdown. We were in Melbourne, Australia, in one of the most lockdown cities in the world. I had started my entrepreneurial career when lockdown started in March of 2020.
Yeah.
We had no money.
Oh, gosh.
One of the coaches that featured in that YouTube video is a guy by the name of Chris Doris. He's the mental toughness coach. And he's coached PGA pros and NFL stars and that kind of thing. But he does a lot of work in the corporate space.
Is he out of America here? Or is
he
from
lives in Chandler in Arizona.
Okay.
He was coached by Steve Hardison.
Oh,
right?
Got it.
And I'd become friends with this Chris Doris guy. Amazing human being. He gave me like 3 or 4 hours of his time. He's $3,000 an hour for free. I said, "Chris, I need to create some money." And I had this amazing conversation with Steve Hardison. He goes, "What do you mean?" And I said, "I just was on the phone to Steve Hardison. We just spoke for 13 minutes. He goes, "What do you mean?" And I said, I spoke to Steve Hardison. What's the big deal?" He goes, "You just called Steve Hardison out of the blue like that and had a conversation for 13 minutes? And I'm like, "Yeah, what's the big deal?" He goes, "Do you have any idea of the gift of courage you have to bring to the world?" And in that moment,
That's where, okay, I'm seeing this.
World's Best Courage Coach was created, right?
Nice.
And Chris said, "Here's what we're going to do." And we came up with this script because it needed, when things sound good, they've usually been rehearsed, right?
Right.
And this plan was to reach out and to cold call the CEOs of the biggest companies on the planet and to deliver this speech. I rang the CEO of Zoom, Eric Yang, and we were on the phone for a few minutes. And he's an Asian guy, and he's very heavily accented. He couldn't kind of grasp what I was saying. He was in his car, couldn't hear me, and that kind of ended. I called some executive at Cisco, and I had this software that I was able to get these phone numbers right.
Yes.
It's legal.
Good.
Barely. And then it was getting late in the US. And so I started calling companies in Australia where I was. And I called this one company, Hodges Real Estate, which is the oldest real estate company in Australia. And I rang this guy, and his name's Tony. He picks up the phone. He says, "Hi, Tony speaking." I said, "Tony Zarka?" He said, "Yes, it is." I said, "Tony Zarka, it's Laban Ditchburn from Melbourne, Australia here." He goes, "Oh, hi, Laban. Do we know each other?" I said, "Tony, we've never spoken before, but today's your lucky day." He laughs.
I'm loving this.
He goes, "Why is it my lucky day, Laban?" I said, "Because, Tony, I'm the world's best courage coach, and I teach your people how to take bold, massive, and strategically courageous action to facilitate their own miraculous outcomes." Well, blow me down, young Bradley. He invites me back the following Wednesday to pitch for some sales, training, and coaching for his organization, right?
Nice.
Right? We're
Nice.
still in lockdown, so it's another Zoom call. No pitch deck, no warm introduction, just an outrageous courage call that ended in a 13-minute thing that involved being invited back. Something happened inside him energetically. We get on this call the following Wednesday, and like Steve Hardison says, the power is in the listener. The power is in the listener. I asked him one question about the direction he wanted to take this business, right? The oldest real estate company in Australia. And he spoke for 45 minutes uninterrupted. I just listened. And he told me everything I needed to know about how to help his business. And when he stopped, I said, "Tony, what about becoming the best real estate company in the state of Victoria?"
Okay.
It's like 5
So you
minutes.
made that suggestion to him.
And
Yeah.
he looked at me and his eyes opened wide. And he just looked up and left, and you could start to see him nod. And I said, "What about being the best real estate company in Australia?"
Nice.
Now he's starting to really
that
nod,
got him
right?
excited, right?
Possibility.
Yeah.
And I said, Tony, you do realise that in order for you to have the best real estate company in Australia, you need to be the best real estate CEO in Australia. And 1 minute later, in his home, he got out of his seat and yelled at the top of his lungs with his hand in the air, I'm the best real estate CEO in the world!
Nice.
And in that moment, Brad, it completely blew the glass ceiling of possibility about who I could impact. And I pitched $250,000 worth of training and coaching to this organization.
Way to go, Laban.
Right.
Way
He didn't laugh at me. He didn't hang up the Zoom call. He didn't yell expletives at me. He just said to me, he said, Laban, I physically do not have the liquid to invest in that right now, but let me see what I can do.
Okay.
Now you can put me in a room with anyone. And I get in rooms with anyone. And I can have these kind of conversations.
And I see that. I see that. Wow, but it all started with that original call there down in Arizona.
That's exactly how it happened. I know it's a long-winded story, but it's important that people hear the process.
Yeah, they do. So, I mean, were you always that way? What fears did you have to overcome to get there?
No, I was the opposite.
You were the opposite?
I was a big scaredy cat for a long time.
Well, tell us about that. Because just so you know, the theme of resilience is helping people overcome that. I know that's what holds most people back is that fear. They're afraid to say something. They're afraid to speak up because they don't know what the result is going to be or what backlash they're going to get. So it's nice to hear that you were there too. And I like people to know that you're not born with courage. It's something you develop. And so please share that with us. I'd love to hear
brother. And it really is. And, my journey, Brad, and you know some of the story, but people out here don't. A couple of days ago, I celebrated 6 years of sobriety.
Awesome.
All right.
Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. And I don't know why I'm getting emotional about that, but maybe it's a big deal, right? It is a big deal. It's longer for drugs. It's longer for gambling. It's longer for philandering. It's longer for limiting beliefs and negative self-talk. I healed an autoimmune disease that was incurable. Yeah. I started running ultra marathons inexplicably out of the blue. I found my purpose and I met the woman of my dreams. And if I could take you through the lowest points of my life, and if you saw how I was behaving in that moment, I was not someone who was handling resilience in a way that maybe people might think about.
Yeah.
But I had no choice. It was what I've been put on this planet to do is to be known as the world's most positively influential speaker by being the world's best courage coach.
Absolutely.
And how would the world's best courage coach conduct himself, right? It's this self-perpetuating momentum that I have to keep developing to be in alignment by making a declaration. And my encouragement to anyone out there, the way that the universe distributes these responsibilities is that there can be more than one world's best courage coach.
Yeah.
I'm cool with that. But I don't think that's what happens when people are really in alignment, with the amazing work that you're doing and the voice that you're giving all these other people and the voice that you have. You're out there to improve the world around you, save the country.
Absolutely.
And this is your gift and your superpower has come through major adversity in your life, right?
Yes.
And when people realize that if they go through the worst stuff imaginable, that can become their new superpower.
And I like the way you put that. And if you'll notice, again, I'll put this up on the screen in a bigger format here. It shows Laban here, cartoon character with a cape on. And I like how you say that, your superpower, how you refer to that with people. I love it. Love it.
I speak to so many people, brilliant, amazing people. People that are heroes to me and to many others that are crippled by an inability to get over something that's held them prisoner in their own mind. And you'd never know until you get to know them. And that kind of ties in. I learned to figure that out by operating at the highest level and asking for people, what do you need help? What do you need help with? And getting super good at receiving help. The more I receive help, not so that I appear weak, but so I can remain strong, and I keep asking for help until I get it, has empowered me with an ability to serve way more people.
And when did you discover that principle? Because that's one thing I've noticed about human beings, mostly with men. They have that, I'll just call it pride. I mean, again, pride can be taken a couple of different ways.
Ego,
but they just,
pride, yeah.
Ego. And they just have that in them, and they just say, you know what, I got to do this all myself so that nobody can take credit for it. I finally came to the conclusion after years of thinking that myself, that guess what? Without other people, there's no way I can become all I can be. People need people. And when I came to that, I don't know if you want to call it a humbling, when I came to that understanding, that's when my life changed. When I realized, you know what, it's okay to ask for help from other people, especially in the areas that you may perceive yourself to be weak. Anything to get that, that weakness a little bit stronger. But when did you kind of notice that it's good to ask for help from other people, or to accept help from other people?
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't know if I can honestly answer the pinpoint date, because I think it's been like a non-linear journey, right? It's like this is like the hills of Utah.
Yeah.
And it may be the word that you could steal, which I created. I think it's a creative word, like epiphanous.
Epiphanous,
right?
Epiphanous.
From epiphany.
Well, I'll give you credit for it. Right? Every time I say it, I'll say I learned this from Laban Ditchburn. It's epiphanous.
So it maybe exists. People out there, like, put a comment in the chat or whatever, like, let us know what you think of epiphanous. But I think, I grew up, my mum and dad split up when I was 3.5. The divorce was really the catalyst for a lot of the escapism behavior that I developed, that then manifested into what I ended up doing as an adult, drinking and drugs and partying and all the other stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But one of her superpowers was that, we had nothing growing up. Mm-hmm. There was a poverty mindset that did the damage. Not having anything wasn't a bad thing. Mm-hmm. Taught me lots of resourcefulness traits and resilience, of all things, right?
Yeah.
But she would ask for help, and I did observe that. So I was okay at asking for certain things, and I never got to a point where I was seriously considering suicide with any of my stuff, which is prolific because people bottle this up, and because they don't share anything that's going around, they don't have any reference point, and they think that they're a terrible failure, and then they take their own lives, and the rest of the family standing around going, "What happened?"
Yeah.
So. But I really think, I read a book called The Go-Giver in 2020.
Okay.
Bob Bergen, John David Mann.
Bob Bergen, okay.
Highly recommend this book. Okay. Voted top 10 best motivational books of all time. Okay. And it's a short read, 2-hour listen on Audible, and it's about getting like the Zig Ziglar quote, you can get whatever you want in life as long as you help enough other people get what they want, right?
Right.
So it's from the service mentality.
Got it.
That shifted at my language, and so I go into every single interaction with what value can I add this person's life. Mm-hmm. Not just people I want things from. I'm not tied to any outcome. The girl in the supermarket, and I talk to a lot of people at the supermarket. Sometimes they work there, sometimes they're shopping there.
Yeah.
Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, people at hotels we're staying at while we're on the road here for the next 2.5 months. There's every opportunity within reason, as long as I'm not giving from an empty cup. I go into what value can I add this person's life. And Brad, I can't explain to you the blessings that flow forth into my life. My life is ridiculous. Even if you made it into a fictional book, it is ridiculous how blessed my life is. And so maybe in the last couple of years is an answer to your question.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, Laban, I've got a lot more questions for you, but we're going to take a quick break here. And when we come back, we're gonna jump back a little bit more into what it's like to be a courage coach. Again, Laban Ditchburn is the author of the book Bet on You, and we're going to get into that a little bit more too, about how what drove you to write this book and what it's all about. But anyway, we'll be right back after this quick commercial break. Hello, my friends. This is Brad Neufeld, and I want to thank you for tuning in to the Resilience Talk Network. You can listen to my show, Resilience, every morning, Monday through Friday at 8 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. On my show, we will be discussing what it takes for you to overcome the day-to-day challenges that all of us face in life, as well as some of the devastating ones that may lead us to feelings of hopelessness and despair. It's my goal to provide you with the tools and skills that you need to overcome anything that is thrown your way. To find out more about my show, visit our website, at www.resiliencetalk.com. That's www.resiliencetalk.com. And as always, until we meet again, go for everything that you want in life and make it happen.
Welcome to the Resilience Talk Network. My name is Jay Walter, and I'm the host of Rebuilding, heard every weekday night from 6 to 7 p.m. You can listen in and learn how to face your fears, overcome obstacles, and make dreams a reality. So listen every weekday night from 6 to 7 p.m. right here on the Resilience Talk Network.
All right, everybody, and welcome back to Resilience Talk with Brad Neufeld. My guest today, Laban Ditchburn. He is the world's best courage coach. And again, I like how he referred to this as the mouse edition of his book, Bet on You. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that here in just a second. But Laban, during the break, we were talking a little bit about some of the challenges that you faced when you were younger. And let's talk about some of those. Share with us what you can about when was it that tell us about your ups and downs. I mean, were you ever discouraged in your life, or did you ever have times where you were just like, you know what, I just don't want to do much, or what is it? How did you change your attitude to where you are now?
You just described basically from 3 years old to about 33, right?
Okay, awesome.
So I touched on it before, right?
Yeah.
Like 3.5, mum and dad split up, and they did the best they could with the tools they had available, right? People have heard that statement before. Yeah. But they also grew up in equally horribly dysfunctional families. And they were ill-equipped to esteem themselves fully, let alone their children. Yeah. And maybe people can identify with their family members and their upbringing. You know, my father grew up as one of four. He was the second oldest in a loveless marriage. They should have divorced. They hated each other. And the kids picked up on that energy. My mum, her father was an alcoholic and verbally, you know, he only started drinking after he came back from World War II, like in his mid-30s, I think. Wow. Which is really unusual, and became a horribly abusive drunk. And she was one of four as well. And you know, my father was a weak man. He didn't get any role models about how to be a high-functioning man. My mother attracted weak men and was very domineering, right? And so there's this perfect storm. And then they are dysfunctional, and then, you know, children come about, and they're born into that. They've got no chance, right? And so I'm grateful for everything that happened. I truly am. And I've forgiven mum and dad years ago. Yeah. All right? I held on to a lot of resentment for a long time, which did me no good. But what it was, I had no role models. I had no examples of functional behavior. So the issue was that I thought I was doing the right thing based on what people who were close to me would say is the right thing. They didn't have a clue. Right. All right? Everyone's flying blind, and all of a sudden you get to be in your mid-30s, like I was at 35, and your life is heading off a cliff. Yeah. All right? And here's the thing, though, Brad. Like, I had a good job. I turned up to work on time. Like, I was funny. I put happy birthday on people's Facebook pages. I appeased my boss and hit targets at times. But deep down, I was a deeply wounded individual. And it wasn't going away. And I knew from a very young age that I was destined for great things. I didn't know what it was. I absolutely have an army of guardian angels looking out for me, because I should have died. That's awesome. Many, many times, right? And people like shamans and many spiritual and religious people all say, without knowing each other, that I have this army of guardian angels who have my back. Nice. And really the catalyst for change was being at a point of rock bottom, and at a point where I was in so much pain that the pain of making change was better. The pain of admitting that I had a problem was better. Than the pain. And one night, like in 2015, I was a problem gambler, and I was gambling on a horse race that was in a country that I wasn't in. It was in Hong Kong. I'm betting on this laptop. Wasn't even looking on a TV screen. I was just putting a bet on and then refreshing the page to see whether I'd won the thing. Like full degenerate gambling, right?
Right.
And in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen was this phone number. I'd never seen this screen before, Brad. Never. I'd been on that page countless times. And I just picked up my cell phone and I rang it. I had about 3 bottles of wine coursing its way through my vein and pounding into my liver. And so I had a bit of Dutch courage, as they call it. And this woman picks up the phone with the most extraordinary angelic voice. I'll never know her surname. But as far as I'm concerned, it was Magdalene, because her first name was Mary.
Oh, okay.
And she listened without judgment for the first time in my life.
Wow.
And then she allowed me to verbally diarrhea everything that was falling apart in my life.
Right.
And I nearly broke the poor woman, but she got through. And then she shared with me about the unbelievably high rates or disproportionate rates of suicide in gamblers because of how quickly they lose everything. And that scared the heck out of me. And through the help of her, she put me in touch with the gambling psychologist, and I got access to this amazing gambling counsellor through the Salvation Army in Australia for 1.5 years for free.
Nice. It's the best kind, right?
Right. And ordinarily, like when things aren't free, we don't pay much attention to them.
Yeah,
but I was at a point of rock bottom where I knew I needed this. And she, in our very first session, she listened without judgment as well. Yeah. She shared with me, the coping mechanisms that children develop as a result of growing up in a less than nurturing environment, which is a fancy word for trauma. Right? And people go through way worse stuff than me. But the point is, we should never compare ourselves to anyone apart from the person we were the day before.
Interesting. Because that's not something you hear from a lot of people. Not at all.
Why keep up with the Joneses?
Yeah, and I think some of the dangers. Well, what do you see as the dangers of comparing yourself to someone else?
It's a bottomless pit. You can never ever be the top of everything unless you're God, right?
Right.
Like even the most successful movie actors on the planet, usually deeply insecure, right?
Yeah.
Like no one can have it all.
Because I've heard that, right?
And the one of the things that I write about in the book as well, Brad, is that there was a study done in the late 1990s, the early 2000s, like an ACEs study. It's like an acronym. It's like American Children Something Studies. And they did brain scans, MRI, on children in North America and children in a war-torn part of the world in Syria. And the part of the brain that was damaged from the trauma of war...
Okay.
Right, so not explosions or bombs or anything, but the trauma of being in that environment, shell shock. Maybe it might be a way to describe it.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Was it in a particular part of the brain? And these children in North America, like 10,000 children, they did these studies on, and the cohort that were in the USA had been sexually abused, and the damage in the brain was the same location, same part of the brain, same damage, same part of the brain. And what that really resonated with me, Brad, and was kind of like, this makes sense. Like, why diminish my experience of trauma or make it worse than what it is when really it's trauma? And how do we fix it?
Yes.
All right? And the beautiful thing about getting exposure to the counselor was that I started to attract people in my life that could help me, that were on a different healing journey. And a friend of mine, this guy Tim O'Toole, who was a cocaine addict who had been clean for about 3 years, a former colleague of mine, lost everything, right?
Yeah.
He shared a book with me by Pia Mellody called Facing Codependence. PIAME, I think it's MELLODY, right?
Right.
And my God, that book was a confronting read.
I bet.
She talks about the different types of trauma that exist, right? Emotional, you heard of these ones. Physical, sexual, you heard of these ones. But like religious trauma, abandonment, children that have been adopted. And what happens is when you read a book like this, all it does is it allows you to learn about who you are and what you've gone through, and then you can pivot, right? Then you can start making adjustments. Most of us are just flying completely blindly through this thing we call life. Mm-hmm. But when you start empowering yourself with knowledge, then you can start making more informed decisions. And I remember my jaw being on the floor and just shaking my head in disbelief, going, no. Like all my behavior was the opposite of what I should have been doing.
Yes.
Right? People pleasing, giving from an empty cup, like negative self-talk and validation behavior. People listen to this going, yeah, it's me. Like, I can save the world, but I've got no money in the bank. Like, here's the homeless guy, here's the last $10, and then the power gets cut off. Right?
Right.
How can you help anyone if you haven't got your own stuff sorted, right?
Yep, you're hitting a few...
right? Does this sound like anyone in this room?
Yeah. Been there, done that.
Does that answer your question? I think we went off tangent there, but...
Oh, no, that's fine. I love it because that's what I love about this is you're telling how it really is. And I know that most of the listeners that really are listening to this, they'll get that. They'll be like, oh, my gosh, if I'm not here already, I was there at one time. And so I completely get it because people have ambitions, but then they don't know what to do. And that's the other thing, too. I love that point that you brought up. Some people can read these books, and all it does is validate where they're at. But it doesn't really give what they need to do specifically to get out of that pit they're in. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Okay. All right.
And let me share this story with you. This happened to me the other day, right? Mm-hmm. Al Richards and I were having a post-event brunch in St. George, Utah. Yep. And my wife and his wife were recording a podcast on her podcast, which is called The World's Best Trauma Recovery Podcast.
I love
if
that,
you
too.
If you heard her story, you go, yep, it is too. And so Al and I are having a great chin wag, which is a conversation.
Yes,
right?
I love it.
And it's when your chin's going.
We have to translate. There'll be a translation in the notes.
There is in the back of the print of the hard copy book. There's like a glossary for Australianisms and New Zealand. So this waitress comes over, and I don't know how quickly it happened. Within about 40 seconds, she admits that she's been in recovery for 2 years. And I said to her, apart from, hey, congratulations.
Yeah.
Like, when's your book coming out? Mm-hmm. And she said, oh my goodness, I would love to, I've been thinking about writing a book for such a long time and I think it could help so many people. And I said, what's holding you back? And she said, I've got this, that, and the other thing. Yeah. I said to her, if you write the first draft of this book by December 31st, 2022, I'll write an endorsement for your book.
Good incentive.
On one condition.
Okay.
You got to read my book. So
nice.
you get a good feel, and if you want to do it in storytelling form, which is exactly the whole book story and storytelling, that's the condition. Mm-hmm. She said, okay. And I gave her my card. It's got my cell on it. Mm-hmm. We ended up speaking for about another 45 minutes while she was serving our table and other tables. Mm-hmm. 3 days later, I get a phone call from this woman, and she's saying, hi, Laban, it's so-and-so that we met the other day. Now, Brad,
yeah.
I'm an I'm a social butterfly and an emotional butterfly.
Yes.
And I've spoken to a lot of people in the last few days.
Yes.
And it took me about 30 seconds to figure out who I was talking to. She said, I want to take you up on your offer to write the endorsement. I'm like, gotcha. And I said, did you read the book? She said, yes, I did. And I said, what did you think of the book? Thinking she was going to say, oh my God, it's fantastic. And she was a little bit underwhelming. And I was like, what's going on here? In chapter 7, there's a chapter called Generosity. And I don't really want to spoil it for people, but it was my 6th birthday in 1986. I was at school and we didn't have any money, and a teacher heard me say that we didn't have any money for my birthday. A substitute teacher who gave me $30 and changed my life forever. Right? Re-talk about how to be generous. This woman, when I said, what did you think of the book? She said, it was good. It was good. I saw some good points. And I said, what's happened in your life since we last spoke? She said, actually, it was my granddaughter's 8th birthday a couple of days ago. And my daughter said we don't have any money. And I just finished listening to chapter 7. And I went, I'll be damned if that child's not having a birthday party.
Yeah.
So she spent the last of her money funding the greatest impromptu 8th birthday for this young girl, and they took balloons to her school, and like she just had this amazing experience because of this decision that the mother would make off the back of reading this chapter.
Yes.
And I said to her, do you see the miracle? What about when people read your damn book?
Yes.
And they have that kind of impact.
Mm-hmm.
How's that going to feel?
Yes.
And the point is, the reason I want to share that story was that anyone that's listening to this, that's gone through major adversity, has a story to share, has a story to tell in a way that will empower, inspire, motivate people when you learn how to do it. And you come from a speaking background, you know how impactful the spoken word can be when you learn,
Absolutely.
right? And like, if anyone's seen that movie, Catch Me If You Can, with Leonardo DiCaprio,
yes.
So the real life character, Frank Abagnale, they interviewed him years later. He taught a whole semester of school when he was 17, a whole semester. And they interviewed him and they said, Frank, how did you do that? How did you teach a whole semester of school? And he said, the lesson book was there and I was just one lesson ahead.
One lesson ahead.
Right?
Nice.
So, and I love that metaphor because we do not need to be healed
Right.
to be able to teach some sucker that's like 2 steps behind us, right?
Yeah. In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man's king.
Mate, what a perfect analogy, right? Like, great, I just threw up the ball, you just smacked me out of the park. And so the difference between the people that produce books and speak is belief and possibility.
Belief and possibility.
And to know that you can create massive impact in the world. And getting messages like that, Brad, as you would know, is one of the great things in life.
It is. It is. And I know when I was doing a lot of public speaking, the way things build, and then you, like you say, you meet new people and they say, oh, I love your story, how you said this, and this. And that gives you just that much more motivation to go out and do more and be more. And I just call that, knowing your value. And you only know that value once you've helped so many people. Is that what you're?
Amen.
Yeah.
And you get good at it.
Yeah.
Like it's not that you're trying to do anything nefarious or untoward. It's like the better I can get at telling my story and not distract with bad speaking habits or whatever, the more impact I can have on people. Because people don't remember what you say, what you do. They remember how you make them feel.
Yes.
Right?
Heard that.
And people will listen to this podcast, and if you ask them what we spoke about a month later, they'll be like, I don't know, but I like that. I like that Brad guy. I'm not so sure about that Australian guy.
Whatever. I was going to say the other way around. Yeah, Laban should be sitting in this seat here. No, just kidding. Just kidding. Hey, I know I can give good interviews. That's what I love doing.
You're brilliant.
I like
Fantastic.
I like to dig things out of people. So anyway, but the book, really quick, Bet on You. What inspired you to write it?
So this is my favorite story ever.
All right.
So to March 2020, the lockdown cripples the world, right?
Yes.
Now, bear in mind, Brad, I never finished school, never went to college. Mm-hmm. I never wrote anything in my life. Mm-hmm. So I had no way of, speaking.
Yeah, listen, listeners.
Right?
No excuses.
I had just been made redundant from a job after being out for a year on my own to run my own recruitment business. Humble pie, hat in hand, got the job. My job was made redundant. I'd been to a speaker conference in Adelaide. It was the last conference in the world to still be open, then was shut down. And I needed a way to get my message out, so I created the podcast. It's called Become Your Own Superhero, right?
Okay.
And through some of my networks, I invited some professional speakers in from Australia to be my first few guests. But then I got Les Brown on. Right, Les Brown came on the show. I had 10 subscribers, Brad. And had he asked me how many subscribers I had, I would have told him, but he didn't ask, so I didn't tell him.
Got it.
Before we started the actual body of the podcast, this is on Zoom, I said to him, hey, Les, what do you think of the name of the podcast, Become Your Own Superhero? And if you know Les Brown and the way he speaks, he just absolutely nailed it, right?
Yes.
I was just so endeared to this man. I was kind of like me and Steve Hardison, but 10x. And I was just like listening with my hand on my heart like this. And then I just verbally diarrheaed my story of transformation to him, right? And then it was and in August this year, I'll be celebrating at that time, it was whatever it is, 4 years of sobriety.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't know at the time, but Les had just come off cold turkey opioids that his doctor had put him on for the prostate cancer.
Yes.
So something I said really resonated with him. And I told him how broke I was as well. We were screwed, man.
Yeah.
And he just said, he said, Laban, do you have a book? And I said, no, Les, I don't have a book. He said, if you're going to be a speaker, you need a book for credibility. And I said, okay. He said, who was the most influential person in your life when you were 5?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought about it for a minute. I was like, is it please be my grandma? It's like, it's my mum.
Yes.
And despite her many flaws, it's her. And
Yeah.
he's like, what attributes did you get from your mum? And I was like, I never thought about this question before, right?
But
And
interesting
I
how he's
encourage
coming
people
at
to do
it.
this, right? What attributes? What good attributes did you get from your mum and dad?
Mm-hmm.
She was unbelievably compassionate and unconditionally loving and tenacious.
Mm-hmm.
And he's writing all this stuff down. Brett, he looks up at me. He says, Laban, this is a God moment. He said, I'm going to show you how to monetize your passion. And for the next 7 minutes, Brad, he reads back to me the blueprint for this book that he wants me to write called Bet on You. He said, Laban, you're going to write the book and get some help if you need it. He said, you're going to release the book. You're going to turn the book into a keynote. You're going to turn the keynote into a 3-day retreat. And he said, even if you muck this up, you're going to make $200,000 in the next 12 months. And I'm going to write the forward for your book.
That's awesome, because it is. He's in there.
And then he said, I'm going to interview you on my show with 4 million followers.
Yep.
Changed my life forever.
Oh my gosh.
And this is mid-May 2020. Mm-hmm. And in a moment of total insanity, I replied, Les, if you're going to write the forward to my book, I'll have it to you by June 30, 2020.
Okay.
And in 6 weeks, I pumped out 30,000 words
Wow.
of the first draft of Bet on You, right?
That had to have been harder than any marathon you did or 60-mile run
Do you know
did.
what? I channeled a spiritual being. It was God was operating through these fingers on my 12-year-old Toshiba laptop.
Yes.
Right? And what I created...
I haven't heard that word for a long time,
Right.
Toshiba. Anyway,
That's how old it was, right?
Coco 3? Anyway,
And-
never mind. Keep going.
And then, in December 29th, 2021, we released the book. And it's the single greatest thing I've ever done in terms of my own catharsis, my healing journey. Owning all of the bad stuff that I did and putting it out into the ether, right? No one can hold any dominion over me because I've reclaimed my power. I don't care that people know that I was a degenerate drunk, that I tried to solicit high-class escorts, that I did, cocaine and did all these, ran away from the cops. And that's all. It's all in the book, right? It's my new superpower, and it allows me to have powerful metaphors that resonate with people that have gone through similar stuff, so that they don't feel quite so bad about themselves.
Yes.
Right? Relieving the tyranny of terror, the burden of tyranny, whatever you want to call it, right? Mm-hmm. And then I managed to record the audio book in Berlin last year with one of Europe's top audio engineers who did Elton John's audiobook in German. Mm-hmm. And for those that love my dulcet tones, I'm very pleased to let you know that it's in my voice.
Awesome. That is inspiring, Laban. Inspiring. That's my word for this really quick. We're going to take one more quick break, and then we're going to tell you where you can get a copy of Laban's book, Bet on You. And you'll be able to tell us where they can get that, correct?
Ooh,
all right. All right. Well, we're going to be right back to wrap things up.
Do you know someone who's gambling with death due to an addiction? Do you know someone whose life is being turned upside down due to a loved one that's battling with addiction? Hi, I'm Al Richards. I am the host of the Other Side of Addiction podcast. I started the podcast due to my wife's battle with alcohol. Let's just say I became addicted to her addiction. Our podcast is helping people understand a little more about those who have battled addiction and those who are hurting from their addiction. Through raw vulnerability, we share stories that help uncover the root causes of addiction. Shame felt on both sides, matter of the conscious and subconscious mind, continued beliefs, and often confusing paths of recovery. We collaborate with real people and their stories, as well as licensed professionals, to help our audience gain a better understanding of addiction. You can find us on Resilience Talk Network. You can also find us on Facebook at Mr. Al Richards. That's Facebook at Mr. Al Richards. You can also find us on YouTube. Just look up the Other Side of Addiction podcast.
All right, and we're back here on Resilience Talk with Brad. My guest today, Laban Ditchburn, he's been telling us about his book, Bet on You. And this has been an awesome interview, Laban. Thank you so much for coming in. I am inspired beyond belief right now. And the nice thing is I get to talk to Laban a little bit more after the podcast here. So I'm grateful for that. Thank you so much. All right, Laban, where can people get a copy of this? Well, where can they find out or enter your world? I know you have a website, so.
Well, Brad, I want to acknowledge you for the amazing work that you're doing, and you are world class, right?
Thank you.
Just to let me speak and do my thing. You know, we came in here without any real clear thing. It's a real amazing feature, and for people that haven't, you need to subscribe. And you need to give this a rating, and you need to go on Apple, iTunes, and give this a rating, because you know what it does? It drives people that would not have heard this, right? They read a review that you write, and they go, hey, what's this Laban Ditchburn guy? And then they change their life, and then they become a world-class professional speaker, and then they save your grandchildren, right?
That's right.
That's the butterfly effect, all right?
Oh, that was awesome.
But you know what? I only want people to read this book that are serious about change. If you know anyone that's gone through addiction or that you've battled with addiction, this book will help you. All right, and it's all through. Get it any country that has Amazon, and if you want to find out more about me and who I am, LabanDitchburn.com.
LabanDitchburn.com. Matter of fact, it's right under us right here, right now. I'm putting it right there. So be sure and go to that website. You'll find out a lot of cool stuff there. But Laban, your story is inspiring. Thank you so much for being on. And I'd like to say thank you for coming all the way from way across the world just to be on my podcast. But I know you're here for other reasons. And
No, just for the podcast. Yeah, we're hitting home today. Yeah,
the last thing, I love the thing there, and this is what our audience needs to understand. When you're going for what you want, and it's something that you feel and you know it's you, and you've discovered that thing that your talent, your skill, and you put it out there to the world needs it. And what Laban is talking about here is impactful. It'll happen to you as well. You know, it takes time. That's the other thing, I think, where people they don't pause and take the time to make it happen. I came up with a saying a long time ago, 95% of the people go 95% of the way. They stop just short of getting what they want. They give up just right there at the tail end. And
3 feet from gold, baby.
that's a good, yeah.
It's worth it.
Yeah.
It's not the destination, it's the journey, baby.
Yeah. Yep. And so be inspired by Laban and his story. Grab his book, Bet on You. Be sure and grab that. But we're going to come back next week with another podcast. We've got all kinds of awesome guests lined up. But this has definitely been a good show. But please stay tuned. Tell at least one of your friends about this podcast. We ask that of you, and be sure and subscribe to our channel here on YouTube, or if you're on Facebook, give us a like and a comment if you don't mind. And also you can find out more on our website at resiliencetalknetwork.com. That's resiliencetalknetwork.com. And if you want to get a hold of me, or if you'd like to be interviewed on our show, you can reach out to me directly at info@resiliencetalk.com. Once again, info@resiliencetalk.com. Or you can call me directly at area code 435-830-6945. That's 435-830-6945. Until we meet again, go for everything that you want in life and make it happen.